Hi everyone, this is Dr Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Today we're talking about equine complex vertebral malformation. I have been in many dissections where horses have had this. I was actually at a recent one last weekend where the horse had this, which is what's inspired us to do this podcast. And I've been a part of many stories and seen the potential devastating effects. So I think it's something that all horse owners should be aware of, if anything, as a safety check, but also to understand that if your horse starts showing some weird behaviours, you might understand one aspect that you can start to look at.
So today I am going to give you guys a front row interview with Raquel. We're going to explore the questions that we need to be asking as horse owners to be aware of this condition so that we can make educated decisions in buying, owning, training, and managing horses. So let's kick this off. First question of the interview: what exactly is ECVM?
So ECVM is Equine Complex Vertebral Malformation. Now, when we first, Sharon started first talking about this, she was talking about it as equine cervical vertebral malformation. And so it's had a few iterations of its name throughout. And sorry, Sharon May Davis is an equine scientist, doctor. She's now a PhD. She's been a PhD for a while, but she's done, on the weekend, she says she's done over 600 dissections. And so it was her that brought ECVM to light in the industry, which has not been an easy place to be for her. And it's been a process over the last 20 years since, I think it was over 20 years actually, since she started to recognize this condition. So it affects the neck, the six cervical vertebrae, and there's quite a variation in how it can present. So the cervical vertebrae has ventral tubercles. So tubercles on the bottom of the vertebrae where muscles attach to. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. And in the C3 to 6, the tubercles are quite long. In C7, they're different. They're quite little, and that C7 has quite a different shape to C6. So what can happen is sometimes these ventral tubercles that are on the bottom of the vertebrae are missing on one side. They could be partially missing on one side. They could be completely missing on one side. They could be missing on both sides of the bottom of the vertebrae. Then they might be added on to C7, and so then C7 has this different, longer ventral process. Or they might not be added on to C7 and just be missing off C6. And then there may also be other things found in the body, and that's why they renamed it Equine Complex Vertebral Malformation, because there can be changes within the ribs. There can be sometimes other vertebral anomalies in the body, like I've seen photos of horses with extra vertebrae that were not normal vertebrae and things like that. So the main aspect of it is in the base of the neck and in that first rib area. The one I witnessed on the weekend was a unilateral, so it was on one side. He hadn't, I don't think, trying to remember if he transposed to C7. I can't remember. It was a lot. But I know that it was affecting his vertebral arteries, and that his vertebral artery was tracking through C7 on one side and not tracking through C7 on the other side, which it shouldn't. And so that means that you've got, an influence of where a blood vessel has changed its tracking, and he had muscles that were attaching in different places than what they should be attaching. It had changed the attachment points of the longus colli, which in a previous episode we were talking about the importance of postural muscles, and the longus colli is a very important postural stabilizer of the base of the neck. So yes, basically it's a malformation of the vertebrae. The horses are born with it. It is not something that develops in a horse's life. And there are potential genetic connections with this condition. So that's why it's very important to start to recognise it a bit more, especially in Australia.
Absolutely. So could you just clarify what is the relevance in the change or aim symmetry in a bone shape? What relevance does that have for the horse, or why would that be an issue?
Yeah, so especially if it's unilateral, so it's on one side, then that change in that bone shape means that the neck is not symmetrical and can never be symmetrical. So, when we want to ride horses, we're always trying to kind of improve that level of stability and symmetry. So that can mean that the spinal cord is not able to sit perfectly in the center of the spinal canal. It can mean, like I said, with the muscle attachments to the bones have been changed. It can mean that you've got different stresses on blood vessels and nerves traveling in and out of those bones, because like a lot of the peripheral nerves that supply the limbs come out of those bones. And so, yeah, it's having an influence on basically anything that attaches to, passes through those structures. If it's bilateral and more balanced, then, you're just not going to have that one-sided kind of pull that can happen. So the horse may be able to stabilize better because it's more balanced on each side. So, yeah, that's probably the easiest way to say that.
And if I was suspicious that this was happening, how am I going to even find out if my horse is suffering with it, or if I have a horse that I am part of owning, managing, training, or I'm considering purchasing a horse? How am I going to find out whether or not this animal could be affected?
Yeah, so to get it diagnosed, it's really a radiograph of the horse's neck at this stage. Obviously, if we could easily put horses in CT, that would be gold standard, but it's not easy to get horses' necks into CTs unless you chop them off at the moment. So there's a specific view of an X-ray that looks at it. It's a dorsal oblique view, which basically means like coming from the top on an angle. And you need to know, the vets need to be aware that it exists and then know how to radiograph for it. So not every vet is aware of it. Not every vet thinks that it's clinically significant, which we'll discuss. And so it's still something that you have to find the vets that are aware of it. But if you have a vet who is happy to do the X-ray for you, they can consult with Dr. Christine G, and she is she's the most reputable vet in this area in Australia, who can help guide your vet through the radiographing process, and she can also analyze the radiographs and give you a report relating to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's say I think there's just something going on with my horse, or somebody else's horse, and I'm in discussion. What are the initial signs of ECVM, like ages? What does it mean, to have a progressive disorder? What breeds is this prevalent in?
Yeah, so it's progressive present in, I think it's up to like 40% in thoroughbreds, and it's well over 30% in warm bloods. It's also in stock horses. We've seen it in Welsh ponies. And so it's across a fair few of the breeds now. It's not just specific to one breed. In terms of, the signs, you might have no signs. And, that's why we have to, make educated decisions with these horses. Just because they have it doesn't mean that that's it. They're completely done for, but it does mean that it might change your decisions in the future. So, horses can start to destabilize. Like you could have a young horse that looks completely fine. Your initial signs could maybe be some little bit of stumbling or tripping in front or behind. They might be a little bit disconnected to their hind end. They may have some weird behaviors sometimes. Like you might think, oh, gee, that was out of the blue. Where did that come from? Or often these horses have more paddock accidents as well. And so they get more injuries. And so then you're just like, oh, like he's just clumsy. So yeah, if your horse was having a lot of paddock accidents, if they had behaviors that you're like, what, bit unpredictable type of behaviors. And then if there was any kind of disconnect to their limbs that you were concerned about, like they didn't seem to know where their legs were, or they like leave them in weird positions. There are probably some of those initial signs, and sometimes the signs might not come out till they're like 8, 11. So yeah, it kind of depends on what they've been doing in their career, and what other injuries that they've had, and then also how they've been managed.
Yeah. But to be clear, you wouldn't rule out a breed for, you wouldn't rule out a breed of horses for not having ECVM or anything like that. It's always investigate, because, just because you have, a heritage line of horses or, something like that, you're not going to be 100%, ruled out.
I've seen it in riding ponies as well. Like, yeah, there's, especially because a lot of breeds have thoroughbred in them.
Yes, absolutely.
So a lot of our breeds have that foundational thoroughbreds. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the more advanced signs? Like, what are you going to see when, we've touched on in the very beginning, even just as a safety check, there are levels of this that can be very unsafe. What are we seeing at the more advanced level of the disease issues?
Yeah. The more advanced signs can be pretty significant. Like I watched a video years ago of a stallion who was being ridden, and he was, I guess you would describe it as having a tantrum almost. Like he was being ridden, and he was basically like a rodeo, like kind of a bucking bronco in that moment. And in that moment too, he was not aware of what he was doing. So I remember them saying we have to like make really loud noises and things to try to like get him to get out of that state, because he's completely not aware of what he was doing. And you could see on the video that he would come back and his face, his eyes were like, what just happened to me? Like, why did I do that behavior? So what we have to realize is it's not in these horses' control a lot of the time, the way that they're behaving. So we can't just train it out of them. We can teach them self-regulation, body awareness, body regulation, how to control their body better, how to be more aware of their body, all of those things, so to try to, help them recognize when it's getting tough, and to regulate that and give you feedback, and we can learn how to recognize that too. But yeah, so that's a more advanced sign. A horrible sign is I've heard of horses running people into trees, killing people, smashing their knees, running into walls. Like they just run. They can just blind run and just run into things. and that's what happens. They're not present when we assume that what's happening in these moments is nerve compression, and that they're just going into this kind of fight-flight place. They can just have unpredictable behaviors. Like I remember, like you could be rugging on one day, they're all fine, they're perfect to rug, next day, and then one day they're like attacking you and do not come near me with that rug kind of thing. So they just, will one day seem like a little bear, and then like a little cuddly bear, and then the next day seem like a ferocious bear. They can leave a leg, like more subtle signs too, they could leave a leg on a jump. And so I also remember watching that stallion, and the sign that I noticed before he had these hissy fits, they were riding him on a circle, his right leg did not move the same way as his left leg. And so this could be a more subtle sign that they moved both their front legs slightly differently. Slight different awareness, like he kind of took it out rather than forward. And he had a lot of vets look at him and say, it was his hocks, it was his teeth, it was his saddle, he needed better training, all of these things. And in the end, we convinced the vets to look for this, and they're like, how did you, it was through the owners, and they're like, how did you know? It's like, well, actually there was a few signs. So also, if they leave a leg jumping, and this is why I'm really fussy when I'm looking at my clients' horses jumping, because leaving a leg means that on that cross-country jump that it could end up with a horse having a rotational fall, and we know that a lot of people have died from that. And what we don't know is there any connection or correlation between horses with ECVM and rotational falls in eventing? Like, yep, accidents happen, fatigue happens, but we have to, I would not jump a horse, especially with unilateral ECVM. I just wouldn't. If I knew that that's what they had, I don't want to land on a potential leg. Also, it's not just the leaving the leg behind over the jump, it's landing on that leg. And if the leg kind of just in that moment gives way, that's also another way that you could end up on the ground. Now, there's other things that could cause that, like neck arthritis, other problems, but this is just one potential reason for that. So, aggressive behavior, unpredictable behavior, running into things, leaving legs behind, tripping and stumbling, seeming like they never know where their legs are, and you're always kind of thinking, oh, are they going to step on my foot today? Are they even aware that I'm here? That they can be very reactive. They can shy a lot. And then they can become very aggressive and unpredictable.
Definitely. And so, the big question is, what does that mean for a horse? People are, if you find out that this is something your horse has, what does that mean? Where are you going? What options are there, or timelines are people often looking at?
Yeah, and it's a very difficult one with that, right? It's difficult because if you miss the subtle signs, it could be catastrophic for you and your horse. And however, there's been a lot of these horses who have, gone through many years of their life without displaying any obvious clinical signs. And so I think the biggest thing is that you're aware of it, and you and also it depends what discipline you're planning on doing. Like if I was buying a serious jumping horse and a serious eventing horse, I'd have to seriously consider it, because I don't want them to decompensate, through an eventing season or something like that. So you need to be aware of it. You need to know the subtle signs that you can look for that show that your horse might not be coping. So basically you need to be able to do a basic neurological exam just to check your horse and know, oh, yeah, like they're aware of their legs, you know, they can do all of these tests and they're doing them really well. Then if you know that your horse has it, I think you need to put in place a plan that improves their postural function and stability. And, you know, they need to be stronger than any other horse in their postural muscles. Not their big muscles, but in their postural muscles. They need to have more support in those muscles. You may need to realize that you do need to hold them to a degree in the bridle. It depends on what stage you start working with the horse, but, you know, some of these horses in, like I remember with this particular horse, you know, they were actually working with him to get an improved self-carriage. And through that process, they're like, he was improving so much and he was carrying himself. And she said, but when I bought him, I asked the owner, why do I have to hold him so much? And so through that process of teaching him self-carriage, he destabilized, but he was older. And so he lost his brace that was supporting him. So if you can avoid that brace from the start and actually create really strong postural support, then that's going to be better. If, they start to show any unpredictable signs, then I would recommend don't be riding them, especially if it's like unpredictable tripping and stumbling, unpredictable like bouts of taking off, anything like that. You need, your safety is of utmost importance there. You need to work a lot with their proprioception and their limb awareness so proprioception, we've done podcasts on this, but really working with their limb control, limb awareness, so lots of like challenging obstacle patterns, varying terrains, varying obstacle patterns, getting them out on trails so that they're as aware and in control of their body as they can be, and that they are, and that you vary their work as much as possible to help promote that postural control. So they're not always in a frame. You know, they have that ability to vary their posture and really, you know, the feeding positions are really important. All the stuff that we talk about are like extra important in these horses because they just can't, they're going to have a harder time at creating those. But yeah, any kind of weird behaviors and things, then you need to know, okay, like this might have to change what I'm doing here.
Yeah. But to be clear, when we talk about these supportive therapies or supportive training for posture, proprioception, balance, and coordination, we are supporting a change in the shape of a bone. We're not going to be able to change the bone back, you know, and change things. So, yeah, just being able to, like you said, recognize that there is things that we can do to support. What, you know, what else would you say for people are, you know, a few hard conversations that people might be having or things that come up when discussing these kinds of horses? Or, you know, if you are in a management role, because there's a lot of people, you know, we've just mentioned a bunch of horses with very prevalent conditions that we know are often in settings cared for by people who are not owned by those same people. So, you know, how would you encourage someone to either advocate for themselves, you know, to bring that up in discussion, or what are conversations that people have or that you've had with people?
It is a difficult one because at the moment it's not that well recognised still in Australia, and there still are vets saying that it has no clinical significance. And I understand that, like there's been papers that have been published saying that. But you've got to look at the population of the horses that were in those papers, and you've also got to recognise that some of these horses in the early days they don't show clinical signs, and they might not show clinical signs until, you know, they're much older, depending on their management care and all of those things. I think one of the difficult conversations is, well, then if I can't ride my horse, can I breed it? And the simple answer is no. Please do not breed these horses. If you knowingly have a horse that has ECVM, don't breed it. It's like you keep it, you can keep it for as long as you can keep it comfortable, but then, put it down. Don't pass it on knowingly to somebody else either. Like, make sure that they are aware of the situation. I mean, there's very talented horses out there potentially with ECVM, like very successful performance horses. Like, I'm not saying that these horses cannot be successful competition horses, but I'm saying maybe some of these accidents could have been avoided if we knew more about the horses that the people were riding, both in racing and eventing. So, yeah, I think the one of them is don't breed it. And probably the second one is if you don't feel safe riding the horse, because I've also spoken to a lot of jockeys and they're like, oh yeah, I know those horses. Like, they feel, like they're really weird to ride. They feel like disconnected, or they like their legs are going in all different directions, or I just don't feel safe on those horses. And it's very difficult for people when it's their job to say, I don't want to ride that horse. And the other difficulty is there's no correlation at this stage, between accidents and what is the clinical state of that horse in that moment. But if you don't feel safe and you're a rider for somebody, as hard as it is, I guess there's two ways to go about it. You can either say, no, I'm not riding that horse, and there is a potential, I guess, that you could lose your job, which is really shit. And the other way is you could, I guess, say, I'm not riding that horse until it's had an x-ray and it's been ruled out as an ECVM horse, because I'm noticing these things when I ride the horse. Now, there's going to be lots of challenges for that, and Sharon has had a lot of threats, and there's a lot of threats that are getting thrown around in the industry in relation to ECVM, because no one wants to know that their horse, especially their like prize winning horse or their prize breeding horse,
The
has
income
ECVM.
producing horse, even.
Yeah, their income producing horse. Like, it is a shit diagnosis that, can and is having profound effects overseas on the industries overseas. Like, overseas now, there's vets that are including this as part of a pre-purchase exam. But there's also the other side of the coin where, there's lawsuits and things coming up as well. So, it is a really difficult topic of conversation. I don't think it's a clear-cut answer in terms of any of it at the moment, in terms of management. What do we do? What do we do with these horses? How do we change it? Even doing this podcast, I've put it off for a fair while because I feel like it's just such a can of worms. Yeah, and there's so many people saying conflicting things that it can be really hard for people to figure out what's real.
Yeah, definitely. Would there be any other comments that you would tell somebody that, come up, or, anything, any final comments or wishes for positive change?
Yeah, I mean, I think for positive change, anything that we can recognize in terms of horse posture and the way that we can help them have better functional movement is going to set any horse up for better success, regardless of what they've got in their bodies. And I think any way that people can improve their observation skills is going to make a massive difference to horses. And yeah, if you think my horse is weird and does these weird things, these unpredictable things, or this part of his body looks so strange, then trust your gut, trust your intuition, and keep investigating until you find an answer that sits well with you, because the number of times I've had people say, like, I knew something wasn't right. I knew, that my trainer was telling me to do this or do that, or just, try a different bit, pull a bit harder, push a bit harder, whatever it was. They're like, I knew that it didn't feel right. It didn't feel comfortable. And so if that's you, then keep investigating until you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me, whether it's ECVM or anything, until you're like, okay, that makes sense to me and that plan makes sense to me, because I have rarely come across an owner that is wrong. Like, if they feel like something is going on with their horse, they're usually right. So advocate for yourself and advocate for your horse.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for answering our questions.
Well, hopefully I've given food for thought, and there's a lot of resources out there also these days to learn more about like the grading system.
Sharon's made a lot of her studies, I think nearly all of them, open access as well.
Yes.
So that was very
cost her a lot of money to make those studies open access.
Yes, very
so
generous.
You've got studies available. There's a dedicated website that you can look at. There's a lot of information out there. The grading system of it is more recent. So grade 4 is now recognised as the most severe. And knowing the grading of your horse will also help you in making decisions going forward, because the lower grade horses tend to have longer, improved, longevity and long-term stability. Whereas if it's already, not already, if the horse has a severe grade, especially grade 4, there's potentially more considerations that you need to take in whether you're going to move forward with that horse, because they're a much greater risk for all of those negative effects like unpredictable falls and behaviour and things like that. So the grading system, I think, was only developed like last year or maybe like in the last 2 years. And so that's a new way that we can kind of improve that knowledge. And also, vets are becoming more handy with the ultrasound, so they can like develop further skills in ultrasounding for the longest coli. They can develop more skills in ultrasounding for the first rib, and kind of recognizing other connections that might be there, rather than just looking at the C6 itself.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler and Sophie Vandenberg, in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can share more valuable insights. Please share the podcast with as many people as you think it would be valuable for, and reach out with any listener requests for topics that you like us to talk about. And if you're a business aligned with our mission, reach out to become a sponsor of the podcast.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.